Senator Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. And Chairman Powell, thank you again for being with us, and thank you for all that your service and all that you and the Fed have done over the last few months. It's been really extraordinary. And I want to echo my appreciation for your comments about the systemic racism that we see in America. Today on the floor, by the way, you may have some interest. Five of my colleagues, 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats at 3 o'clock today will be reading Dr. King's letter from a Birmingham jail in its entirety. And I believe his message of 1963 is as important today as it was then. And I know we focused a lot on the data and how it has affected minorities in this country, particularly our Black population. Latest data showing the Black unemployment rate at, just under 17%, Hispanic unemployment rate at almost 19%, while the white unemployment rate hovering around 14. Bloomberg has reported that the African-American owned businesses declined by 41% from February to April, representing 440,000 businesses, a stark contrast to the 17% drop we've seen for white owners. CNBC declared that we have a housing apocalypse coming before us. Alabama Legal Services, who does so much for the poor and needy in Alabama, particularly within housing, has said that the avalanche of evictions is here and foreclosures aren't far behind. So I want to focus my questions really on our minority communities and underserved communities instead of the overall economy. What downside risk do minority communities see if unemployment benefits are not extended?
So minorities are substantially overrepresented in the unemployed, particularly the unemployed, since that something like 25 million people have had their employment disrupted as a consequence of the pandemic. And in that group, minorities are very much overrepresented. So all measures that help that group help them, and all measures that don't help them make life tougher for them.
So measures that we can keep people on the payroll, make sure that they have, and I know this has been a concern from folks, that there's no incentive to stay off the payroll, but some transition to where we can provide incentives to get back on payrolls, to get back to work. You would favor that, I assume.
We don't take position on particular aspects of fiscal policy, but I would say this: there's going to be a lot of people going back to work in coming months, but there are going to be a lot of people who can't because if they work in Nevada, for example, as we were just discussing, in the travel and entertainment industry, these aren't going to be jobs. So it's going to be a while. I think some form of support for those people going forward, in my view, is likely to be appropriate. During the Great Recession, I think unemployment assistance was reauthorized on a number of occasions, and it just is not only can they not go back to their old job, but there are no jobs in that industry, and it's just really tough for them, for at least for a period of time to give them support, and balance that with incentives to get back to work.
Thank you. A similar question with regard to the minority communities, with regard to businesses. Minority business owners face enormous risk as it is, even before this pandemic started. So the same question: what are the downside risks for our minority businesses if overall business aid is not extended by Congress?
I think we, as I mentioned during my opening remarks, the small businesses of America, that's where the jobs are created on net. And, we don't want to, business people are going in and out of business all the time, but what you don't want is a wave of avoidable insolvencies, which will weigh on the economy for years. And that's all the more so true of minority businesses because of the important role they play in our economy and in their communities.
All right. And finally, again, focusing on minority communities, if renters and homeowners are not helped with extended eviction moratoriums, what effect will that have on our minority communities in America?
So evictions and foreclosures and things like that have well-documented negative impacts on people's lives. I think during a pandemic, which is still ongoing, it's particularly important because you wind up sleeping in somebody else's basement or in a shelter or something when that happens. And it's not a good time for people to be. If there are ways to avoid that, keep people in their homes while the economy recovers and while the pandemic is dealt with, that I think those are things well worth looking at.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman Powell, and thank you, Chairman Crapo.